Hey everybody, welcome to The Whole Elephant. I can't believe we're saying this, but this is already the season 1 finale. For season 1, I shot for 9 episodes trying to get 9 cool guests to come on and have a chat, and here we are at the 9th one. Thank you so much for those of you who have been with this journey the whole time. And if you're wondering, I'm already starting to work on season 2. Have about 5 really, really amazing guests lined up already. And I'm hoping to release that around February or March. But I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the conversations that I've had with some of you outside of this podcast. You know, mostly from the Tim Minchin one, certainly struck a chord with people. And those conversations are, man, that's what I live for. I love that stuff so much. So thank you. Today our guest is one of my great friends, Oliver Schnee. Have you ever met anyone in your life that you know them for a certain amount of time and you just go, this person is brilliant? Like they are actually a genius at what they do. That's my feeling about Oliver. Oliver is a composer and orchestrator here in LA, working his way up in this crazy industry here in LA. And he is a genius. I mean, whenever I'm working on a project with him, my go-to line is the Hagrid from Harry Potter line, "You're a wizard, Harry," because he does stuff that my brain can't even compute. And so we had a chat about the music industry and what it's like to try to break into an industry like that. And then we got into all the God stuff like we always do. I hope you guys are doing well. Enjoy the chat. What's up, Ollie?
Hey, how you doing?
Here we are, man. Again, we can just say this is round 2.
Was I that bad?
No, not at all. For those listening, Oliver was my very first guest, and we recorded it right up here in his studio space that he's letting me use for these podcasts anytime that we have a local guest that's able to come in and actually do it. And I wanted to have one of my good friends on for the first one so that I can try it out and see if I'm terrible at this.
Which you're not.
And 2, to register it on Apple and stuff, you have to have an episode. So I just wanted to
get
the registration done. So we've done this once before, but listening back, I was like, I could do better. I have a better flow now.
Yeah, well, I think I could do better too. It's my first time too, so I'm excited to be here.
This is an exciting week for us, though. This week we released a new song together. Through the church, "Hallelujah, a Cry in the Dark." This was a new experience for me. One, to be able to get my song orchestrated to the level that it was and have actual real life humans play on it was
a whole lot of real life humans, almost
from across the globe.
Yeah, 22 string players and then a whole rhythm section. We're close to 30 people.
Yeah, and we recorded the rhythm section individually here in LA, and then we recorded the strings in Macedonia, which was a super cool experience. We were in a studio in Hollywood, and we were basically live streaming. I don't know what the exact term was, but we're essentially live streaming with Macedonia, talking to the conductor as he's working, giving him notes, and 22 string players, and that was incredible.
It was so much fun, and it's crazy what you can do with technology. Get linked up via satellite, and next thing you know, you're seeing them in real time, and then you're listening to the same quality that they're hearing in Macedonia, and it came out great.
Yeah. Is this something that's going to continue post-COVID?
Oh, God, yeah. It was happening before COVID, but now, especially during COVID, they've been getting a lot more business, it feels like, and I think post-COVID as well, not only because of the boom in cases in America, but also just the reality of how much cheaper it is to hire remote orchestras. But that being said, you know, there's
somebody dying outside.
Yeah, okay. Where should I start? Why don't you ask me again? Will this be a reality?
Yeah, is this something that is going to continue post-COVID, this kind of remote recording thing?
Yeah, I think so. It was actually happening before COVID, and when COVID started and then flourished, for lack of a better word, I felt that more and more people are actually using the remote orchestras.
Yeah.
Especially people in America were hiring the outside orchestras because not only is it cheaper, but they were open. And here in America, Los Angeles in particular, there's restrictions on how many people you can fit inside a room now.
Yeah.
And so, like one of the big studios in town used to be able to fit 70 people, and now they're only allowing 20 because of 6 feet apart, and which is smart and everything, and I'm all for it because we want to fix this and solve this issue and be as smart as possible. But in the meantime, if you have a project that needs a large section, what are you going to do? Okay, well, we're going to go to Europe.
Yeah.
And we're going to stay in LA safely.
Right.
And it was interesting because even in Europe, every musician, the conductor, everyone, they're all wearing masks. They were all 6 feet apart. They just have huge scoring stages over there that are available and open. And so, yeah, it was a blast to do that and to be there with you. And we've worked together on so many songs and have done tons of different arrangements and whatnot. We've recorded strings before. We did it at Sunset Sound, that legendary studio. Yep. But when you came to me with the idea of doing it with, a larger section, I was really excited. And
so you're a composer, musician. Your tagline kind of on social medias and your website is music for all media.
Yes.
What the heck do you do?
Basically that. I mean, my bread and butter is writing music for film and television. Mm-hmm. That is what 80% of the work I do involves, and that's what I love doing. That's what I've dedicated my life, the pursuit of getting better at writing music for visuals, whether that be television show, a feature film, a documentary, a commercial, whatever. I've always loved film, television, and I've always loved music. And so when I realized that you could have a career putting the two together, I was just elated. However, then I'll meet someone like you, Eric, who's a playwright and, wants to have someone produce and orchestrate and arrange the band and the charts and all that for the stage. And I love doing that. Other times it's someone needing a musical director for, a tour. Sometimes it's a YouTuber who comes in and has a melody and doesn't know what to do with it. Yeah. And we talk about, what kind of sound and vibe and genre they're going for. And they might have a huge following, but, musically they have a good sense of melody or rhythm, but just logistically they don't know how to get it done. And so I come in and help produce that. And but yeah, music for all media. I mean, I also do a lot of arranging strings and horns for records, which I love doing as well, because there I'm not working with my own compositions to start with. I'm given a song that someone else has written, and number two, there's lyrics. I'm usually dealing with instrumental music, but now I have lyrics, and in traditional songs, as in music to be sung, I believe vocal is, the king. You got to serve the vocal, and I might come up with what I think is a really cool string part or horn part, but if it gets in the way of the vocal, then you're actually doing disservice to the song. And so it's, you learn that, you're just a piece of the puzzle. You're not there to be the star. You're there to make the song and the vocalist as special as they can be.
Yeah.
So
you grew up around music your whole life. Your dad, Bill Schnee, is a legend in the industry. Give us a sense of who your dad is and kind of the environment you grew up in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very kind. To me, he's dad first.
Yeah, of course.
And then, as you said, quote, music legend second. But I think, at this point, it's fair to say that that's accurate. My dad Bill Schnee is a very successful engineer, mixer, and producer of records, and he's basically achieved, in my opinion, all that there is to achieve in that field. So, multiple Grammys. He's won 2 and been nominated for 9 others. And he's won Emmys. He's won Dove Awards. He's earned over 125 gold records, and I don't know how many platinum records, and which is a very interesting topic, because now with people no longer buying music like they used to, those are few and far between, and so it's a very special thing to me, at least. He kind of he respects them and appreciates them for sure, but he's not the type of guy that's gonna like shove it in your face. He's very humble, and for a long time at his studio, he only had like a handful of gold and platinum records in the bathroom as a joke, when most studios had them all over the walls. He always was just like, let's just make music. So I always respected him for many reasons, one of which is, not taking the success of all that too seriously. Even his Grammys and the Grammy plaques and all that, he had a wall in the studio that was very nicely framed and whatnot, but it was surrounding a huge hand-drawn picture of the Three Stooges.
Stooges, I remember that well.
And so he's a but anyway, he's worked with a lot of cats. Some of the big names include Whitney Houston, the famous song "I Will Always Love You" for The Bodyguard. He tracked that, and that went, I don't know, 9 times platinum. I mean, it's probably more now. But then everyone from Smokey Robinson, Rod Stewart, to Elton John, the Beatles, and Billy Preston and Dr. John, and he won 2 Grammys for working with Steely Dan for arguably 2 of their most famous and successful records, Asia and Gaucho. And he also was at the forefront of what's called high fidelity audio, and working with Doug Sachs for Sheffield Labs direct-to-disc records, and his album Thelma Houston Pressure Cooker was their most successful album for that label, and my dad produced that. Not only produced it, but direct-to-disc, meaning it's being cut. This is back in the analog days, but literally everyone is performing in real time, including the mixing. So there's no going back and doing another take. There's no overdubbing.
Right.
He's performing just as much as the musicians are, and if they're out of tune, and it's being cut direct to disc. So, you got to, in between songs, you got to tune really quickly, quietly, and then get ready. And then there's tempo changes, there's all that, and you do a whole side of a record, and then you flip it over and you do it. So you could do like 18 minutes of great music, and then someone plays a wrong note at minute 20, and then you got to start all over again. So he's one of a kind. And
so that's the environment that you grew up in.
His studio too, which was home away from home.
You have a brother and a sister who grew up in that same environment and are off doing different things. They're not involved in music. When did you know that music is what you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, first of all, they're the smart ones not pursuing music. My brother is incredibly successful in the Highline food and wine world, and my sister is a brilliant speech pathologist. And so I'm just constantly amazed at their achievements. But I knew I wanted to do music fairly early on as a kid. I always was writing music in my bedroom, terrible songs on my bed, playing the guitar. And I started working at my dad's recording studio, Schnee Studio, on Lancashire in North Hollywood, Universal City. And I started climbing the ropes of working at the studio. It wasn't like any sort of nepotism. My dad didn't, put me at the top right at the beginning. He's like, no, you're going to start by cleaning the toilets and taking out the trash and getting lunch orders. and which I, looking back on it, I really appreciated,
Sure.
and helped, keep a sense of humility, and here's your place in the world and the business and whatnot. But yeah, I realized last year of high school that writing for film was what I really was passionate about, and I was fortunate enough to. My dad was hearing one of the projects I had done, and he said, why don't you give James Newton Howard a call? And I'm like, like that sounds awesome. Why? I need to know him first.
Yeah.
He's like, oh well, James and I go way back. Give him a call, and see what he thinks of your music and of you. And I'm like, okay. And I'm 17 at the time, in high school as a senior, second semester, I remember. And so I went over to his studio. We had lunch together. He showed me what he was working on. I was just absolutely blown away. Here's, one of the top film composers alive.
Yeah.
And he's like, I remember him saying, like, I like you. You want to keep coming? And I said, yeah. He's like, all right, come back every week. And that went on for about 3 years. And it has blossomed into a personal friendship. And he's been an absolute gem of a human being towards me, and invaluable mentor. And I'm so thankful and grateful to him for so many things that I've either told him or things that he has no idea that really taught me a lesson. And that was so inspiring too, because at the time I then went to college, and I was, studying music and communication. I was double major and whatnot, but I was learning so much outside of the classroom in addition to, my university studies. And I was just, I'd come back from his studios in Santa Monica, and I would just be blown away. And he really took me under his wing, because I had a few other internships with some high profile composers for film, but he was the one that really took me and invested in me.
Yeah.
And it meant so much to me. And so, yeah, I really found my passion for music working and creating music at my dad's studio, which was home away from home for me, like I said a minute ago. And so,
What is that passion? What do you love about it?
oh man, well, I love that every project that comes my way is a different genre. For starters, I'm not a quote unquote jazz artist where I'm stuck playing jazz. I don't want to say stuck, but I'm playing only jazz. Or I'm not a pop artist where I'm only doing pop.
Yeah.
With film and TV music, I could be doing something that's very, one project that's very kind of World War II patriotic, full of, heroic characters and all that, and all the music, patriotic music that entails. And then, the next month I'm doing a project that was shot in the Middle East and has Middle East scales and instruments and stuff. And I'm hinting towards the project that you and I did for the Special Olympics. And that was a total blast. And then there's another project comes along, and it's a very modern artist, and he wants live strings, and he's never recorded live strings before. And so, we have a blast doing that. And then you get a call, and there's a producer who's 31 years old, but he's obsessed with music in the 60s. And he's like, I want you to sound like Lee Hazelwood / Jack Nietzsche / Oliver Schnee. And so, you go into that mindset, and then there's, on and on and on. So basically, I love the fact that I'm always being challenged to do something new, learn new techniques, new scales, new instruments, forced to meet new musicians. I need to record this instrument that I can't even pronounce.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do I even find someone who plays that? Fortunately, I'm in LA, where, you can basically find everything here. And now, going back to what we started with, the remote recording, now, so many people have like home setup recording gear setups and whatnot. It's, you can pretty much get your hands on anything. And so, but, I do always prefer to be in the room with the musician. But there have been plenty of projects where I've never been in the room with the client. They live on another continent, literally, or they live on the East Coast of America and whatnot. Like, and a great example is the work I've done with National Geographic, and that's certainly not to be an asshole and drop any names or whatnot, but that's just been one of a total pinch me moment because I grew up loving Nat Geo, Planet Earth, all those beautiful ocean and land animal documentaries and whatnot. And so a few years ago when I got asked to write music for them, it was a dream come true. Absolutely.
Do you like when you think of a project like that, and because mostly what you do is music to picture, does the ocean have a sound to you? Does the ocean have an emotion, and the emotion has a sound to you? Like, how are you conceptualizing how music fits with the picture?
Yeah, well, that all starts with talking with the director and the producers, and that goes back to what I was just about to say, which is all of those Nat Geo cats were in New York or DC, or they were on location in Africa or the Galapagos Islands or wherever. And so literally I'd be talking to these people who I've never actually been in the same room with. And some of them would tell me like, hey, here's what we're wanting. By the way, I'm not going to have reception for 2 weeks because I'm going to be underwater, and I'm like, oh my God. Or, hey, check out this photo. There's a lion way out there. And, by the way, how's the music going? And I'm just like stuck in my studio with, no light. It's just dreaming I could be out there getting, the experience too. But yeah, literally to answer your question about the ocean, I've actually done a lot of work for projects that involve the ocean because I'm really involved with preserving and conserving the oceans. And it's a big passion of mine. But yeah, I mean, everyone interprets the ocean differently, but it's the ocean, this gets kind of conceptual. It's very dynamic. You can be calm and relaxing, but also can be restless and full of, fear and whatnot.
But like when you say those terms, calm, restless, that triggers what in your brain? Like, does that trigger chord progressions? Does that trigger percussion? Like, how do you translate that into what you're putting down?
I think, well, for me personally, because I think every composer might do it differently, but for me, one of the things it starts with is tempo, and then also instrumentation-wise, what am I going to write for? And then also, am I writing something that's going to be really busy or something more, that's laid back in the sense of less is more? But really, when I'm writing for visuals, I'm writing for someone else. I'm writing for a company or for a director or for these producers. And so really, when they give me words like what restless or calm or, full of energy or whatnot, it's a discussion. It's like, okay, well, what's your definition of restless? What's your definition of Western?
Because there's the infamous time when someone told you to make something more beach ball.
Oh yeah. That's.
It needs to sound more beach ball.
Yeah, absolutely. That was for a Hallmark TV show that will remain nameless. And Hallmark, it's great. They make their type of product and they have a huge audience and it's maybe not the sexiest thing on earth, but as a young composer, I'm thrilled to have a gig, and I'm thrilled to have a gig that here, because we did about 8 shows together last year, and the people I worked with were really great. However, there was one point for this one episode where an executive chimed in, as they can and often do, and they said, yeah, all this sounds great except, the 7th cue, it sounds like it's missing something. We want it to sound more like a beach ball. And this was in an email, so I'm just sitting there like, what the heck? And I contact my director and producers, and they're like, yeah, we have no idea what they're talking about. But, they're the one who signs the checks. So,
Yeah.
we got to get it done. So I ask the network, like, hey, I have a good bedside manner, and I was raised to be professional and not have an attitude when something like this happens. And I also grew up in the studio hearing artists ask for ridiculous things.
Sure.
I want it to sound more orange. I want it to feel like a meadow in spring. And you're like, what? But who knew that growing up, all that would teach me for moments like this. So, but yeah, as that story goes, I asked them, okay, I'm happy to do that. Can you give me a definition of what you're thinking for Beach Ball? And do you have any reference tracks?
Right.
And they just wrote back very, very short and firm. They were like, no, figure it out. And I had to do this in under 12 hours because they were dubbing it the next day. And so, long story short, we figured it out, which was basically just very generic pop music. Right. And I wrote 3 different 30-second tracks and gave them options because it's always good to give the client options. Everyone likes being able to choose as opposed to here's what it is. It's like, can you give me 2 options, 3 options? Just a little, because so much of the job, so much of many jobs is psychology, Yeah,
sure.
But they came back and they were like, well, the first one's definitely Beach Ball, obviously. And I was just like, oh my God. But, it's funny now. And it was funny then. It was just a little stressful because I was under the gun and I had to write this.
So you said that your brother and sister, they probably made the smart career choices.
Yeah.
What is the state of the composing industry? Why is it it's a hard thing to break into?
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of stuff gets made, and especially now with Netflix and Hulu and so many shows are being made, but it's still controlled by such a small group of people, it seems like. What is the state of the industry right now for those of us who just see the final product?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. I'll give you my
From your
take.
perspective.
Yeah, okay. My take on it, pre-COVID or where we're at right now?
Pre-COVID.
Okay,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, if you think about the number of albums that are made every year, it's quite large. And then you think about how many films are made, and it's a lot less.
Yeah.
And still, most of the films being made are never see the light of day. Very sadly, but it's just true. They might go to festivals, they might get accepted into festivals, but they may not win awards, or they might get distribution, but it only it goes straight to DVD or it goes straight to streaming. But now there's just so much content, which is a double-edged sword. That one could argue, there's more opportunity. But on the other hand, a lot of songwriters, a lot of musicians have realized that, no one's really buying music anymore, and streaming you can't, unless you're Beyonce, and even still, but, you're not going to make a living off of streams alone.
Yeah.
I have friends that are like, oh, well, my song has 2 million streams on Spotify, and I only made X amount of dollars. And it's like, well, yeah, it's just the sad, reality of how it goes. So a lot of people have realized that there's good money in not just writing music for film, but sync licensing. So getting your music licensed for a TV show or for a film. And so now people are a little more aware of the potential that they can earn money and maybe have a career, making music. And so it becomes more competitive and more impacted. And, I'm constantly seeing more universities have programs for film scoring, and which is cool and great and all that. But like so many of these programs, it's like kind a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are all about, we want you to come. This is kind of more my outlook on just creative arts education in general, but we want you to come, give us your tuition. We'll teach you some basic skills, and then good luck getting a job.
Yeah.
And there's no kind of there's not a lot of resources for the people afterward. But then again, art has always been more about what can you do. Show us your portfolio, show us your reel, rather than where'd you go to school? Let me see that degree. You know what I mean? No one cares about that. They want to know, like, can you show up? Can you deliver? Do you have a good attitude? And can you make the process enjoyable? Can you finish on time? Are you organized? Can you have your yes mean yes and your no mean no? As opposed to some dude or girl who went to, the best school in the country or the world, and can't do the fault, what I said. And there are plenty of people that are incredibly talented, but are so temperamental or disorganized or, egomaniacal. Is that a word? Egomaniacal? So egotistical. Now I'm overthinking. They have such big egos. I almost said testicles. Ego-testicles.
Ego-testicles.
That they don't get work. And then on the other hand, there's plenty of people that maybe aren't as talented.
Yeah.
But they're really good at playing the quote-unquote game.
Yeah.
And they're really good at networking, and they're really good at selling themselves and creating a brand, and especially with social media.
Right. That's part of the game now.
Yeah. And so... I try to find a healthy balance between the two, and I hope that answers your question.
One thing that people might not know about the industry, when something says it was scored by one of the big cats, like we'll just say like Hans Zimmer, this is not Hans Zimmer sitting down and writing every second of that music, right? He has a team of writers that work for him.
Well, I mean, there are films where he writes all the music. These days, he's so busy and successful that, he's not the only one that does this, first of all. He's kind of the one that everyone loves to talk about. But yeah, what you're saying about having like what's called ghost writers or additional writers is very common nowadays in, the A-list movies and whatnot. And is
that a path you didn't want to go down?
That's right. I didn't want to go down that path. There were opportunities in the past where it was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, the salary looks nice. Having a salary in a regular freelance world is refreshing and whatnot. Yeah. But I'm glad that I have chosen and continue to choose to do to create my own path. As hard as it has been at times, as frustrating, as scary as it has been, I wouldn't have changed it if I could. And
I mean, you've worked with some big time people on big time projects.
Yeah,
Leslie Zemeckis. I'm looking at the poster behind you right now.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Nat Geo, James Franco. You've worked with big time people. Do you consider yourself successful right now? Especially,
no.
I mean, especially in light of the environment you grew up in. You grew up where the best of the best in the industry was coming to your dad's studio every day. I mean, even projects of people you've never heard of, it was still the best players in the world that were coming to play on them in that studio.
Yeah.
Do you think that like warped your sense of
100%.
success is?
Yeah. There's that thin line for me between being completely inspired and absolutely intimidated.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been able to be incredibly fortunate to work with Leslie and her husband, Robert Zemeckis, who's, Academy Award winner and director for many great movies like Castaway and Forrest Gump and Back to the Future and whatnot.
I just bought a Castaway ball.
Wilson?
A Wilson ball.
Nice. Yeah. With the blood hand and everything?
Yes. Yes. Because I have an uncle who he's got some asthma breathing issues.
Okay.
So COVID would ruin him.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't be in a room where a dog was
Oh man.
a long time ago, you know. So he went in lockdown and he just decided he was going to grow his beard out, and it is massive now.
Wow.
So I had to get him a Wilson ball.
That's
Anyway,
awesome.
Off topic, but
No, that's
continue.
awesome. It's crazy that something, a prop / character from a movie like that can
Iconic.
still, yeah. And so, I mean, when you ask, like, do I think of myself as successful? I mean, comparatively speaking, it's, I do and I don't. I feel like I'm successful in the sense that I'm incredibly lucky and grateful and thankful that I get to wake up and pursue music, keyword pursue, music every day. And I'm able to live in this ridiculously overpriced city and have a lease for my apartment, and then also have a separate studio space. I'm able to record orchestras around the country and around the globe. I'm able to say no to projects. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I also, kind of going back to what you said, I always look up to people like James Newton Howard or the Hans Zimmers or the John Williams or the Alexander Desplat's, and without realizing it, I'm comparing myself to them, and so then I'm like, geez, man, I haven't done shit,
Totally.
I'm doing nothing, and I get really hard on myself, and I feel like I've done nothing, even though I just finished a project where, Academy Award winner Dame Helen Mirren, was narrating the and I was like, holy crap, that's cool.
Yeah.
Or did a project with another Oscar winner, Davis Guggenheim and whatnot. And so, every once in a while I have to take a step back and look at my situation, where I'm at, compare myself with, okay, where are other people in my age bracket at in their careers who are pursuing film composing? Because I never compare myself to people in my age bracket normally. Like I said, I'm usually comparing myself to people that are, over twice my age, who have been doing music longer than I've been alive, and who are the top of the top because they have just so much, skill, talent, and more experience, And so it's not fair for me to judge myself against John Williams in his prime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not fair. Like, and I remember
it's so
talking
hard not to do, though.
It's very hard to do. Yeah. But I think there's it's a double-sided coin, there's, or double-edged sword or whatever the phrase is, because it also, there's a benefit to it because it creates this drive in you, or at least in me, it really creates this drive where, I'm not satisfied, so I'm going to keep going. So I always have this fire under my ass where I'm like, this isn't good enough, keep going. And then I'll achieve quote unquote, achieve something, or I'll work with someone I really respect, whether they're known or unknown, or I'll get to be a part of a project that I really believe in, or whatever. And so, I don't know. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, I feel like I have a hard time finding that balance, because I feel like if I am happy about where I am, then I'll lose my edge and I won't be driven to keep going. And finding that balance between I'm driven, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to push, but I'm also happy and content with where I am right now in the process is a really hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, and I think it's a very relatable thing, regardless if you're in the arts or entertainment, you know. And so I mean, I never want to be content. That's why I said before, I really like how film and TV scoring and everything that I do, music for all media, which is just a phrase. Not my name of my company or whatever. It's just kind of a tagline that I like. It's always challenging me. It's always pushing me to, okay, now I got to learn how to write in this genre, or now I got to, and also you're working with different bosses all the time. And a lot of them have very strong personalities, to put it mildly. And so you're also learning how to deal psychologically, relationally, how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think for me, I have to catch myself when I'm going too far down the self-loathing hole. Like,
wow. We've heard a lot of horns and sirens drive by, but never a wow.
Yeah, they were just, yeah. And I have to catch myself, because it's very easy for me to not self-pity at all, but just like, damn it, man, I haven't done anything. Like, I've got nothing to show for it. I know friends that are buying houses. I know friends that are getting married, having children, all this, typical, normal, what was typical and normal. Everything's changing as time goes on. People getting married later and having children later, et cetera, et cetera. And, 25-year-olds in LA can't buy homes like they could back in the day.
Right.
In this city, at least. And, but yeah, I mean, it also keeps me grounded and humble, because I know a ton of people who sadly, have maybe not achieved as much as they think they have.
Right.
And yet they have the ego of, I don't know, James Cameron, or
right.
I don't know, any number of people that, just egomaniacs. And, at least James Cameron can back up his strong opinions with a few movies that have set world records and have won Academy Award. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, why does this? And it's not always young Hollywood. Sometimes these people are like grown ass men and women, and they just have this air of arrogance and entitlement. Right. And it's so disgusting, but maybe you really believe in the story that they're creating. Right. And so working with them is a pain in the ass, but you're like, well, I believe in the story and the film in the long run. And so, you learn to be really patient and have a good bedside manner fast. And I think I was really lucky, because I learned that as a kid growing up in my dad's studio, working at the studio, and seeing some really intense, difficult people being complete jerks to other people. And so, I remember my dad telling me when I was assisting him on a session, he said he wrote a note and slided it over to me on the console. And he said, it's really good for you to see how good producers work. Yeah. Yeah. Because I had seen plenty. And then there was an arrow underneath, and he said, on the back of the Post-it, he said, and also really good for you to see how bad producers work. Mm-hmm. And he was hinting at this producer. And so I, so then I became even more aware of like, okay, what is he doing that? Right. And what I realized is what my dad was referring to that day was the producer was completely like, abusing is too much of a word, but abusing the musicians, and wasn't giving them breaks when they should have been, and was being incredibly hard on them, and was being ruthless to the engineer, who was my father, and this producer came in with this really negative energy, with a whole bunch of stress, and it just, that's intoxicating. It fills the whole room. And I think making music should be fun, and but yet still be professional and get the job done, but have it be an enjoyable experience. It's called playing music. You're playing, but on the other hand, sometimes when you have a room full of people, whether it's a jazz trio or a rhythm band, or all the way up to a 50-piece orchestra, and someone's paying for each person, and the studio and the contractor and the engineer and the copyist and the conductor and on and on. It's very expensive. And so people get stressed, and I'm just so grateful that I grew up at my dad's spot. I don't ever take it for granted. I don't ever let that go to my head. I just look at it as education, and because I just saw early on so much and decided, okay, I want to be this type of person in the studio,
Right.
and outside the studio for that matter too.
Yeah, I had the same thing growing up with, because I grew up, sports guy.
Yeah.
Basketball, baseball, football, pretty much all the way through high school and then football in college. I had that same experience with coaches where you just go, okay, this coach is teaching me how I don't want to be as a human.
Yeah.
And at that point in my life, I thought that I wanted to coach. I thought I was going to be a football coach my whole life. And I learned just as much from the people just saying I'm not going to do that as much as the coaches where I want to emulate that.
Yeah, there's all different types of mentors. I mentioned James Newton Howard being, one of the...
Yeah, he's a jerk. Terrible.
No.
What not
James,
to do. You've told me so many stories about how big of a jerk he is.
Okay, that's... whoever's listening, you're being a jerk right now. James has been nothing but the absolutely most lovely human being ever, and didn't need to take me under his wing or didn't need to help me in any way. But there's also mentors, like you're saying, on the opposite end. They're like, and they teach you how not to act or how not to treat people or how not to, perform your job. And so they're just as important. And to quote my dad, part of finding what works is finding what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And, clearly I've been very inspired and shaped by a lot of the experiences that I had growing up in my dad's studio, the people I met there, and the lessons my father taught me, and that he still continues to teach me.
Yeah.
And now what's so cool is, now I'm able to bring him onto my projects. It's come full circle. And it's such a emotional thing, just when any parent-child can work together, but when they're also working, doing what they love, there's plenty of family businesses where they don't necessarily enjoy doing the work, but it's the family business. But, when my dad and I are in the studio together behind the console, or if I'm conducting or whatnot, and we're there together, it's awesome. And so.
Well, let's spend some time talking about God, faith, spirituality.
Okay.
That's part of the whole elephant and figuring out different perspectives on life. So where are you with all that? How does spirituality, faith, any of those things interact with your life?
Those are a few big questions. I would say, I grew up in a Christian household with Jewish blood.
Yeah.
And I've been, like in junior high and high school, I played in the worship band. Mm-hmm. It was mainly because I just wanted to play music. Mm-hmm. And college, I went through, when I started to become a young adult, at USC, I kind of went through phases of feeling like I was a quote unquote strong believer. And then all throughout my 20s, I feel like I went through 6-month phases where it was like, yeah, I'm really into this. This is working. And then all of a sudden, it was the exact opposite. And you bet your ass that when my dad had cancer and we were in the chemo ward every day, I was cursing out, quote unquote, God, Jesus, whatever, every day, and not just for me, but for all the other people, because, not everyone survives cancer like my father did, and I'm so thankful he did. And so I've kind of run the whole spectrum of, been a bit of feelings towards, Christianity or Judeo-Christian Western religion. And where I'm at now is, I believe that there's more out there. Mm-hmm. I believe that when I say I'm spiritual, I'm not, one of these Ojai New Age, here's some crystals to put under your
pillow.
Yeah. That's not me. That works for some people. Good for them.
Yeah.
But I generally think life is full, and I say this not to be morbid or depressing or cynical, but bear with me. Life is suffering, and comes from a few psychologists and psychiatrists that I read about and read their works. And so whatever you can do to minimize that suffering, you should do. Now, of course, that doesn't mean, okay, hey, let's, snort a bunch of blow and get a, bunch of hookers and, this makes me suffer less. No, not at all. But finding healthy ways of not for the search of being quote unquote happy, but for the search of finding meaning.
Yeah.
Which I think there's a big difference. And for me, that's what I'm searching for, because I believe if I find the meaning of what I'm here for, then whatever ultimate happiness or joy that exists from that will come. But I go through these days. I go through. I pray occasionally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have plenty of questions and doubts. I would say that, that cliche, oh, I don't like organized religion, blah, blah, blah. But because there have been countless events that, show reasons why people don't like organized religion. However, there also are plenty of churches, parentheses, organized religion, nonprofits that are not crooked, that are not, broken. And, doesn't mean that people are perfect, because there's no such thing as a perfect person. Humans are humans, and that's shown time and time again in everyday life, but also in the Bible. But for instance, how I met you, what I mean, was through a church. Yeah. And I think that church is as well run as a church can be, in my experience. Just like any organization, you work at a McDonald's, you work for an insurance company, there's always going to be certain people that you don't mesh well with, or certain whatever. But then, I really owe a lot to you in particular, and Dave and Gabby, in all three of you guys, and Scott, all four of you guys believing in me and helping me when I really needed help. And I can't thank you enough. But I believe that God, and when I say God, the capital G, we're talking about Christian God. If we're talking about that, I believe he sees and knows your heart. I still can't grapple with the fact that, like, for an far extreme example, like, there's multiple, rapist person, and at the very end he accepts Jesus and he's going to be in heaven. It's like, wait a second, what the fuck? It's like, I've chosen, and I continue to choose, because it is a choice, to be as an upstanding citizen as well as I can. I'm not perfect.
You want some level of justice. You want some level of judgment.
But I know more than anyone, because I am very self-loathing and always trying to improve myself. I always ask you, like, what are my blind spots? Where am I failing? Blah, blah, blah. I know I'm not perfect, and I know more flaws than I do positive characteristics about myself. Right. But that being said, I think we all want some sort of justice. I mean, you could look at the reason why the Batman comics and movies keep being remade and whatnot. Yeah. Because that's the whole premise of it, is you want justice here and now. And
for sure. And that is what was so radical about Jesus when he lived on the earth, is he came into a group of people that wanted justice, that
Right.
had been oppressed, that had been for 400 years before that trying to rebel and retake their land and getting their butts kicked. And
Yeah.
that's what they wanted. And that's what he purposefully was not.
Yeah.
And that's what is so hard, because we want that justice. We want that. But I think at the end of the day, I don't want that. I think at the end of the day, I want grace for everybody. I don't like the idea that this life is some kind of test that we're trying to pass to get to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And for the simple fact that if I was born and raised in that same situation as that murderer or that rapist or whoever,
Yeah.
with the same DNA, with the same upbringing, with the same circumstances, I probably would make the same decisions.
Yeah.
And that just becomes a lottery system to
Right.
me. And I can't fathom a God whose grace doesn't cover everything that we could do on this earth.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, right now, to be honest, I mean, if you ask me, do you even believe in heaven and hell? I'd be like, no, to be honest. And so that, that doesn't mean I'm not searching. I'm constantly trying to figure out, okay, what's all this for? And the number of existential crises I've had in my life, let alone, in my 20s, quite a lot. But, just the whole, what's the whole point of this? Like, okay, I love writing music. I love writing music for film. But what's the point? I mean, really, at the end of the day, like, even it's so massive to me, all of this, and it gets overwhelming, and so, but yeah, no, I definitely see what you're saying, and I don't like thinking it's a lottery system either, but I do know that it helps a lot of people believing in this, just like a lot of these religions help a lot of people, and that makes me happy.
I think at the end of the day, most people the vast majority of people who are in some kind of organized religion are just trying to figure out how to get through life and be the best person they can be. And somewhere in all of those religions, they have found or think they can find how to accomplish that.
Right. Yeah. And it's not like I'm. Someone once told me this, and it really resonated with me. I didn't become a Christian. They told me that I didn't become a Christian to escape hell. I did it to escape hell on earth that I'm experiencing right now. And, I certainly have my fair share of, going through hell on earth.
Yeah.
Even with, the life I've been fortunate to have been given, and the circumstances and the opportunities and whatnot. But, and it's not a competition. Everyone has their own version of hell, whether it's a physical thing, a family thing, a mental thing, an emotional thing. And, it's not anyone's call to say, oh, well, you're not entitled to, complain or to say you have a hell because you're this, or you didn't, mine is worse than yours. It's like, That's not the point. I mean, if you talk about the Bible, it's like, cry with your fellow brother and laugh with your fellow brother. I don't know the quote.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like I say, it kind of goes in waves. So, I mean, if you had asked me this when my dad was going through cancer, I'd be very, a much different answer I'd give you. If you asked me, I don't know, who knows, 6 months from now, I might give you another answer. And I think what that shows is I'm not stuck in any one way. I'm not, and I'm always open to new ideas and new opinions, and because I'm a changing person. The world is changing, and what were you gonna say?
No, I think the Bible is chock full of people who did exactly that. The Bible's not a story of perfect humans
No, not at all.
that showed great examples of what to do.
Yeah.
There are so many, you know, all of Psalms is David crying out to God saying, protect me,
Yeah.
heal me, be here for me. And it's cries of doubt.
Yeah.
You know, I was just reading up on Jeremiah and his story as a prophet, and he doubted a lot. There's a whole character named Doubting Thomas. Like, you know, I don't think the point is to gain knowledge to be sure.
Yeah.
I you know, it's faith. It's
Right.
something we can't be sure about. The point isn't to be sure. The point is just to keep trying,
Yeah.
keep gaining knowledge, to keep trying to be the best human you can be. At least I think that's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it doesn't help that, especially the Old Testament, you know, like I feel like there are a lot of Christians who kind of say, oh, well, you know, that's why the New Testament means so much, you know, it's, you know, much more graceful God, you know,
Right.
Jesus. And it's like, and they kind of, not throw away, but they kind of disregard the Old Testament. They're like, that's the Old Testament God, you know, fire and brimstone. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Fire.
yeah. Sure.
And it's like, well, you can't do that because so much of who Jesus was he was fulfilling the prophecies that were in the Old Testament.
Yes. But Jesus was also the full revelation of God. So
Some believe, yes.
You have to weigh what was said about God in the Old Testament with who God revealed himself to be through Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I understand. I hear what you're saying. There's so many in the Old Testament. There's so many like stories that are just like batshit crazy. Like there's one in Genesis about, I think it's Genesis 30 something, 38. I don't know what it is. 1830. It doesn't matter. It's in Genesis. You can look it up. Where, you know, this guy has sons and one of the sons gets married and the son dies. So he has, you know, the brother marry him and he wants children, the father of the son, and makes him sleep with this woman. But at the very end, he pulls out and spills his seed, literally spills his seed on the ground because he doesn't want to do this. And then he gets killed. He has
our good
how
friend,
fucked up is that? How am I supposed to think about this?
Our good friend Perry Moore, would always tell people that that's his life verse. If people said like, "What's your life verse?" What he would say Genesis, whatever it is.
Oh my
end of
God!
That story.
Yeah, I mean, but that's.
But
like,
I mean, we're talking about a completely different time. You're looking at that story through your 2020,
right? Which
Western
is all I
lens.
can do. Which is all I can do on one hand. But on the other hand, you know, this is still God. That the same God we're talking about because it's the Holy Trinity: God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Not necessarily the same God.
What? You're saying it's a
this
different
is-
God from the Old Testament to the New Testament?
No, same God, but their culturally and time period interpretation of God.
Okay, well, I can understand, like, you know, they talk about slavery all the time and that, you know, and it wasn't like them having, you know, just black slaves like in America, you know, and whatnot. I mean, they were, you know, Hebrews having, you know, Hebrew slaves and whatnot. And it's like, okay, not that I condone slavery, you know, for all the snowflakes out there.
If they knew exactly who God was and they were right about it, Jesus wouldn't have had to come.
Right, but God, as I remember in the Bible, and I could be wrong, God was one who killed the son. And even if it wasn't, if it was his dad, I mean, then you get into the question. I mean, it's so fucked up. Excuse my French. That's not French, Oliver. That's what my mother would say. She speaks French. But like, you know, I deal with some of the, you know, more very common questions like, okay, well, if he's, you know, omnipresent and all loving and all this stuff, okay, well then why is it right now statistically there's someone being, mugged? Why is there someone who's being touched by their uncle? Why is murder still happening? Why is COVID happening? You know what I mean? Like on and on and on. And then it's like, then you get one step further, and like if you believe that God has the power to raise the dead, he has the power to save someone from an illness, he has the power, you just touch his shirt and you're healed. Well, then it's like, okay, he has the power to do all these things, but he's choosing not to help all these other people, and then that fucks me up even more. I'm probably cursing more than anyone else on your podcast.
This is going to be my first explicit warning on Apple Podcasts.
I'm fucking sorry.
It's going to have the explicit warning next to it.
Yeah, but that just means there's good content. I hope not just boring.
Yeah, I struggle with that idea all the time, and how or if God does interact with the world. I mean, that gets into a discussion of free will. Do we have free will?
Yeah.
I believe we do. And free will is the ultimate act of love from a God that creates you, to not be a puppet, to let you. So why do bad things happen? Because we have free will, and there, there's generations of bad decisions, good decisions that have been passed through the generations that have led to now, that informs people's DNA and informs who they grew up to be and all those things. So that always messes with me is God interacting with this world in a one-on-one linear saving people in the moment way.
Yeah. And that makes me, when you say one-on-one linear, that makes me think like, my brother was in the hospital when he was a young kid, and he was at Children's, and he had a huge community of people praying for him, like just massive. And he was, his illness was cured and he was healed. And of course, all these people said, oh, God healed him. God healed him. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't know that for sure. We do know that the doctors played a big ass part in it.
Yeah.
But we also know statistically, they've done studies that people in hospitals who believe in some sort of religion, they mainly focus on Christianity, actually have a higher percentage of living than not, and but then it's like, okay, well, in the next room over, I remember seeing they had plenty of people praying for them, but that kid didn't make it. So what's the deal? You know what I mean? Like you can't have both. Like
if you want to create the narrative that God saved one, then you have to answer the narrative. Then why didn't he save
exactly?
And that's where people go down the rabbit trail of some really bad theology, I think.
Yeah, I remember talking to a pastor once, and he's like, "Well, where did you learn that? That's not in the Bible." I'm like, "Well, I learned it at church." He's like, "Well, that's not what the Bible says." I'm like, "Okay." And then he said this like 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, "Okay, well, what am I supposed to do?" Like, I grew up going to church, like
where you grew up and what church you went to and all those things.
Yeah, and
church isn't like Starbucks. You go halfway across the world to a Starbucks, it has the same burnt flavor as the Starbucks right next to your house.
Yeah.
And church isn't that way. Every church is unique and different and has a different pastor who believes different things. And
yeah, I've met some really great ones, and I've also met some really shady ones. And but I have nothing out against. I'm not against churches at all. Blah blah blah. I mean, I think I recently watched Spotlight again. About the Catholic Church and all of that. I mean, that's systemic.
But it's like you said, organized religion has its pros and cons. The Catholic Church also provides I think it's something like 25 or 30% of healthcare for people across the world. That's a massively good thing that the Catholic Church does.
That is a good thing, but does that excuse the fact that it starts from it goes to the top and they're all that to the families, to the people that, were abused, and that trickles out to everyone they interact with.
Sure.
And, is it, what is worth more? Well, if you ask the people that reviews, they're like, hello, that's not, you don't even need to answer that. It's obvious, but
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, obviously those are far extremes. I mean, one on the other hand, there's stories of, churches being partnered up with organizations around the world for clean water, for building homes, for providing food and clothing and all that. They've been doing it for years and continue to do it. And they don't have a quote unquote agenda. It's not like they have a publicist that says, oh, hey, do this. For instance, like when there's a horrific natural disaster and then all these celebrities come out of the woodwork and use their celebrity to, encourage people to donate, which is ultimately a good thing. But it's like, well, the church has been donating money and doing all this stuff even before there was a tsunamis. Sure. And now there's a tsunami, they're doing it still, what I mean? They're doing even more. And so, I always respect that part of it. And I always, one of our mutual friends who works at Montrose, Scott, he's really good at dealing with homeless people. And I'm always really impressed by how he handles and deals with them with respect and care and attention, but also, there have been times when a homeless guy comes in, he's got poop all over his pants and he smells just in general, but now he literally has poop on his pants and, it's distracting the whole church service and whatnot. And Scott is really good at dealing with people like that, or people who have, been on the streets for so long, they've developed, mental disorders. And so it's cool that he, it's a cool thing to observe and learn from. And he's got, you guys have like boxes of clothes for people like that. You have kind of like a food supply just ready to go. And, and it's cool because, there's a lot of homeless people that find security in the church, even if they're not believers at all. They'll be camping out on the front doorsteps of a church. You'll see driving around town. Right. They just feel safer there. Anyway.
Well, man, I love that you question. I love that you think hard about these things. I have a hard time jiving with people that don't question it, that just take faith in religion at face value and just believe. There are times that I kind of wish that I could just do that. Yeah. That I just like believed whatever any random pastor said to me and I can just kind of float through life. But that's hard stuff. And I love that you're questioning about it and thinking about it and wrestling with it. If people want to check out your work and follow what you're doing, what's the best place to find you?
There's multiple sources. OliverSchnee.com. That's spelled Schnee. Looks like Schnee. Also, Instagram. My handle is just my first and last name, Oliver Schnee. Again, spelled Schnee. And there's some really exciting projects coming up. One of which is, like I said, I've been writing music for other people this whole time. I decided it was about damn time that I write an album for just myself. And so I've been recording this last year a bunch of tunes that are not tied to any filmmaker or any director or any company. But it's just Oliver Schnee with a blank page. And I can go up when I want to go up. I can go left when I want to go left, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm so excited about it. And that'll be coming out digitally and on vinyl in 2021. And I hope someone enjoyed my ramblings, and apologies for all my cursing. But I loved being here with you. So thank you for having me.
I appreciate you doing this a second time around. Thanks, buddy. Love you.